Hello, I'm Suzanne James. Welcome to Nightshift, the podcast where we talk about all things voluntary assisted dying. We have a very special guest today. We will be speaking to Death Doula, also known as End of Life Doulas, Shannon Beresford. Shannon is a death doula working in South Australia through his website yourpathguide.com.au. He's also a advocate of voluntary assisted dying and is registered as a volunteer witness for BAD in South Australia. To tell us about that and some of his other good work, Shannon joins us now from Adelaide. Shannon, welcome.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. Lovely to be here.
Now, you've been a death doula for 4 years now. Tell us how you ended up in the end of life care line of work and also how it's morphed into what's now a full-time job, yeah?
Mm. So it started off on a caring journey. I ended up being the primary carer for an elderly relative here in Adelaide and fell in love with the caring role. My career at that time was in the corporate space within the travel industry, but my heart started to get drawn into this sort of caring space. I guess through the magic of algorithms in social media, end of life doula information started popping up and it caught my attention. And very quickly, I did some research and fell in love with I guess, the work, what it means to be doula. And from there, looked at education pathways, etc. Last year, I was made redundant from the corporate space and have been working full time as an end of life doula since then.
Now, you're also registered as a volunteer witness for voluntary assisted dying applications in South Australia. Tell us what that role entails and what experience you may have had in dealing with people who are going through the VAD process.
Okay, so as an end of life doula, I absolutely advocate for choice, and voluntary assisted dying, or VAD as I'll probably refer to, is one of those choices, and thankfully we have that now. I wanted to be able to help people navigate that process. It is very clinical, and doulas are non-clinical, but the ability to be a volunteer witness just means I can help people along that path. It's not terribly complex. It really involves me attending a meeting with the person, with the applicant, and their team who are navigating that. And provided that everything is in order and the applicant is still fully prepared to proceed, I witness their signature. So from my perspective, it's quite a simple process, the voluntary witness program. On the other scope of sort of the actual final stage where the person is making that choice to then take the medication and end their life, that is something I haven't crossed yet. I have to be really honest with you. I have a couple of colleagues here in South Australia, and I believe you may be looking to speak with another one in the near future who has experience. But I must say that I work with a peer colleague here, and she has actually her first VAD client, and I will be helping her through the process. So I do look forward to being able to provide the backup and support needed from a doula perspective.
Now, you list an impressive list of services on your website. I'd just like to run through some of the key items. First of all, it's end of life planning. You know, end of life planning and advocacy, including liaison with service providers. Tell
Mhm.
us about the types of things your clients have you helped them with, and do you get generally a warm reception when it comes to dealing with providers? Because there can be quite a few of them involved at the end of life.
Can be challenging. So I think that sort of range you just mentioned is everything from advanced care directives, which have become so important, and still so many people don't have them in place. And that document is really where we can talk and explain our wishes when we no longer have a voice. So we could be unconscious, we could be non-responsive, facing the end of life, and our wishes are documented. So very important. Navigating systems and people and organizations can be really tricky, but it can be things from helping a client with their GP and actually attending appointments with the client to then potentially not translate the wrong word, but to help the client and their family understand a diagnosis, what that journey means, what recommendations there are, is palliative care being referred. So that's one element. Help at home. So we can help navigate services to come in. They can be a little bit thin on the ground, I must admit, and challenging, but slowly we're building up a network of providers that work with us. And if someone needs some help in the home, um, taking shopping or cleaning and those basic items, we can also help try and navigate some of those. But a lot of our time is really spent helping the person navigate the medical side of their illness at the end of life.
Now, all of this obviously is very stressful on everyone involved, not least of all the poor person who is terminally ill or facing their early death for whatever reason. One of the services you offer is as a sound therapy practitioner. One of those is Tibetan singing bowls, which for the uninitiated is an ancient tradition in meditation and relaxation that actually predates Buddhism. How did you end up as a practitioner of that, and how does that help people who are facing all these difficulties at the end of their life?
Hmm. I've always had an interest in sound, vibration, and energy for quite a long time, and discovered a practitioner course a few years ago, which I was able to complete the 2 levels required to be a practitioner myself. And I find it's a natural fit to the end of life space, although I do offer sound healing for anybody. They don't have to be facing their end of life. But I think the beautiful sound and the energy provided by the bowls reacts with the person's energy. So each individual person actually gets what they need from that therapy. And that could be relaxation, it could be a feeling of well being, of creating some levels of calm, an example. But it just felt like a natural fit to the end of life doula work. And it sort of fits within that, dare I say, spiritual space, energetic space that I think is really needed, particularly as we progress to the end of life.
Another one of the services you list is you offer specialty services for LGBTQI plus community members. What was the need you saw in the rainbow community that gave rise to that, and how is that going?
Mm. Well, I'm a gay man myself, so I resonate with the community, and I think for many of us, our idea of family and friends support is very different to a traditional family. Um, and as we get older or come to face a terminal illness, that community may not be as strong as perhaps a hetero family. Hence why I feel a pull to try and offer an extra layer of support, particularly for those who may have a very small community around them, supporting them through a life-limiting illness or a terminal diagnosis. Um, I've been fortunate enough last year to run a end-of-life, what would we call it, an awareness campaign, a training program through one of the community centres here in Adelaide. We ran monthly training and learning sessions for people to come and learn about all aspects of end of life, and that was really well received. Hopefully able to do some more work in that space. I work quite closely with the Rainbow Hub, which is here in South Australia, and we are planning to bring another end of life training session there. And I welcome community members to reach out if they are facing end of life or are unsure of what options and choices they have. I'm more than happy to step in and help.
Now, they often face discrimination trying to access normal basic health care. I'm guessing end of life is no exception. What has your experience been around that?
I have to say that we're lucky here in Australia. Our palliative care process and service is incredible and very much um, non-discriminatory in the experience that I've had. And I've worked with both private teams and public health teams. I think where we may see some discrimination is perhaps in the sort of fringe medical area. And it really is about advocacy. And that's one of the important parts of my role is to step in and actually really remind those services of who this person is, what their situation is, and that they need to be treated equally and fairly compared to anyone else. But I have to say that really is very minimal. It's not the main case that I've experienced so far,
You know,
thankfully.
one of my personal favourites you list as a service is your bucket list travel service. Now, I know that this is a tailored R&R holiday service for anybody, but concentrating on end of life, can you tell us about the kinds of trips people who may be terminally ill have asked you to book over the time you've been doing this, maybe when they're still well enough to travel?
This is a bit of a joy, Suzanne. It draws on my career within the travel industry. So when I left the corporate world last year, I just felt a gap. And the aim of bringing travel into your path guide, into my business, is really, as you've said, to offer bucket list travel for people. And it could be, for example, grandma has been given a terminal diagnosis. She is still able to travel, still mobile, but maybe wants to take her family on a cruise or a trip somewhere. And normally they're shorter duration, so a cruise around Australia or a trip interstate or flights up to Queensland to spend some time up there or even into Southeast Asia. It's where the person feels comfortable traveling, where there are still good medical facilities available if there is an emergency. But it gives the family and that person to create a very lasting, beautiful memory that will live well beyond, their final day, their final breath. And it's an absolute honor to be able to help people do that.
I'd like to finish by asking you about what reaction you get from people when you tell them what you do for a living. Is being a death doula still a barbecue stopper, or are we are we seeing a breakdown of taboos, especially now that VAD is legal almost everywhere, Northern
Mhm.
Territory accepted, obviously, and also around 30% of the population now identify as no religion. Do you find it's well received these days, or is it still something people blink at?
When I first stepped into this world, there were a lot of raised eyebrows, as you said, and barbecue stoppers for sure. However, over the last few years, death literacy, and that's really the understanding of death and dying and end of life, has greatly increased through some fantastic education campaigns. We have things like Dying to Know Day in August each year, which is aimed to bring the awareness of end of life planning and death and dying to the general public. So those efforts have really helped open people's thoughts and ideas around the work that I do. I still get raised eyebrows every so often, but for most people, they are generally interested. One of the first, I guess, reactions I get is, "Gosh, how amazing! I couldn't do it." And I guess it is not for everybody, but if you are felt drawn to the work, it's an absolute joy and pleasure to be able to work in this space.
And I don't think until you've cared for somebody who is actually dying, as you and I both done in various capacities, that you understand what a privilege it really is. That
Hmm.
these people know that it's their last day, weeks, months, hours of their life, and they've basically made you part of a family, and you're there when they take their last breath. And I think it's a great privilege to be able to not only do that work, but that we can openly and publicly talk about it now. It's been an
Absolutely.
absolute pleasure talking to you today, Shannon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you for having me, Suzanne. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Now, if you'd like to contact Shannon or find out more about his fantastic work, you can go to his website, yourpathguide.com.au, and that will give you his contact details and also list some of his other services. As Shannon said, next time I'll be interviewing Bridget Kelly, who is also a death doula from South Australia, who has very close personal experience with a family member and the voluntary assisted dying process. Don't miss it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to Night Shift.